I think basically the cycles are dead. I believe, and I've said it also in Israeli mainstream media press, and that received obviously lots of headlines. Bitcoin will be $1 million by 2030. I believe it will probably be sooner. The likelihood of a godly candle, which you probably know the theory of like this 1 week or 1 month candle of $100,000, it's coming probably sooner than what people estimate.
Hey guys, welcome back to the show. Today I'm here with the most influential Bitcoiner in Israel and founder of Crypto Jungle, Ben. How are you doing today?
I'm excellent. How are you?
I'm doing great. I'm looking forward to our chat. For those people that don't know you, do you mind to give us an intro and tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yes, of course. So first of all, thank you for having me. I'm Ben Samocha, or Samocha, if you say it with an English accent that nobody gets the in Hebrew. I'm 34. I studied economics and business management in Ben Gurion University in Israel. And basically, I discovered Bitcoin around early 2017, at least as an investor, as understanding what. I was using it as money for poker online for about 2 years before that. Without asking what it was. When I started learning about it, my mind just blew, and I understood immediately that there's something here that's going to change the world and create a revolution in money and finance, and therefore in how society works. And I decided to basically be the one bringing this revolution to Israel. So I founded Crypto Jungle in late 2017. Crypto Jungle is the largest media platform in Israel now. So essentially, I have a website, YouTube channel, podcast, community, and I host the largest conferences and events in Israel for thousands of people. Overall, I have more than 100,000 followers cross platform. I also founded Blockchain and Digital Currency College, which also operates here in Israel and in Hebrew. My college, I teach the government, regulators, bankers, law enforcement agencies, blockchain companies, Bitcoin companies, etc. And I am essentially considered to be the number one influencer and center of the Israeli ecosystem. I advise to publicly traded companies and to startups. I advise to regulators. I'm an expert witness in court. And basically, I made sure I had no life so that I can passionately bring Bitcoin and blockchain to as many Israelis as possible. And that's the short story.
Of course, guys, as always, in the description you'll find every single link, so make sure to go and follow Ben. What is wrong with fiat currencies? What is wrong with money nowadays?
What's wrong with fiat is almost everything. Basically, the core of it there is problematic, which is the notion that central authority, be it a government or a central bank, can not only dictate how much money will be in supply, but also what the price of money will be. So essentially, we focus a lot on central banks making decisions about the interest rate, or QE and QT, quantitative easing and quantitative tightening, which are all measurements and ways to enact what they call monetary policy. Now, what I see as wrong about it is on several layers. The first layer is the most important one, which is fiat. Fiat means that we are obliged by law to use this currency as money. They do it in a way that forces business owners to receive this type of money as payment. And if you don't, it's illegal and you can be subject to fines and even jail. And the most important part is that you have to pay taxes with it. So even if you made your income with Bitcoin or with an external currency like the dollar for most countries in the world, you still have to create fictional and artificial demand to the local currency so that you can pay taxes with it. So that's problem number one. Problem number two is the audacity to believe that the central authority can look at the market, look at the economy, and decide what the price of money will be. So I see interest rate as the rent you pay for using money today and taking it from the future. If the central bank is the one deciding what the price of money will be, what the interest rate will be, then it basically dictates what my time is and energy is worth. That gives them a lot of tools to steal money from us and to basically fictionally create an environment where we think that we received a pay raise, like a 10% pay raise, but by playing with how money works, they essentially steal money from us. These would be the two main issues with fiat money, and it's gone so far today, especially after more than 50 years that we are operating in this system, that the wealth is insanely divided to the 1% and the 10% that own most of the wealth in the world. And when I say wealth, I don't mean fiat money. I mean actual assets, actual equity in real estate, in stocks, in Bitcoin, etc. They own most of it. So, for example, the most crazy statistic that few people understand is that less than 10% in the US hold more than 85% of the S&P. So we think that the stock market is rising and wow, we are getting richer. No, they are getting richer. We are also getting some, but we are competing for a much smaller pie. And I believe that is wrong. And not only I believe that is wrong, I believe it has huge societal impacts that can basically be explanatory for many of the wrongdoings and the bad things in our society: incitement of war, political chaos, the left and the right, all this divide and conquer. It's most of it, I would say, is because money is artificially controlled. I'd sum it up by saying that at least here in Israel, we get told a lot that money doesn't come from the trees, right? So that you can't grow money. I would say that that's not true. It does come from the trees, but the trees are just not planted in your garden. They're planted in the central bank and top bankers' gardens, and that's how fiat money works.
If you look into the US per se, well, they own still the reserve currency, right, up to today. So we can look into them. The dollar keeps the value better in other currencies, like, for example, the Turkish lira or many others, right? But it's still a terrible store of value. Like the past 100 years, it's lost like 99% almost of the purchasing power, which is complete crazy. People end up in owning liability instead of assets, which means whoever has the control of the printer, we could say, or whoever has the trees, like you put them, they actually control the supply and control so much more. And how do you see Bitcoin coming in and saving us from this?
I see Bitcoin as a tool to create competition. Eventually, in economic studies, as much as they are propaganda today, you are still taught about the importance of competition and why it's good. It creates more efficiency. If you are scared that your competitor will take away clients from you, so you understand you need to improve somehow, lowering prices, improving the product, improving the service, etc. So by having an asset without a liability, which by the way, I would say a funny story is that essentially the central bank liability, the dollar or the shekel or the Turkish lira, what does it mean that it's a liability? It means that the central bank owes you a dollar. But what is a dollar? It's a liability of the central bank. So it's this ongoing loop that you're just stuck in. We owe you a piece of paper that's worth nothing other than a promise that this piece of paper will be worth something, and history shows that it usually ends in zero as the price of it, as the value of it. And Bitcoin as a replacement of gold basically enables us individuals, the 99%, to be in control of our assets and of our time and our energy, which means that eventually, if we adopt Bitcoin in a self custody way with understanding the idea behind it and why we want to hold money ourselves, we create competition to how money works today. Money leaves the old system to the new system. Therefore, the old system understands that they have to improve themselves by, for example, not infinitely printing money or by defaulting on bad debt, etc. And therefore, it creates this kind of trade off that at the very least, if we are realistic as opposed to optimistic in terms of will Bitcoin be the only currency and will all fiat money die, I don't think that will happen. I think fiat money will have discipline. It will know, like the money managers will know, if we up, if we do things that are wrong, then people will run to Bitcoin. We will collapse. There will be a run on the bank. And this decentralization will be basically disciplinary system that prevents the trees from being planted only in one place.
How do you feel about Bitcoin's volatility? Because many people that I speak to are saying to me, oh, Bitcoin is too volatile to be a store of value. I mean, what's your two Satoshis?
My two satoshis on that is that it's a matter of living in a hybrid system. So we are not only building and adopting a new system, Bitcoin, which is in a very early stage, even though it's already 16-year-old. But we are also doing it while the old system is at its almost peak printing and basically decline. So when you look at history and you judge different periods of time where you had relatively big monetary changes, like adopting gold and then adopting paper money and then adopting receipt money and fractional reserve, all these kind of periods, they took time, usually decades or even centuries. So we cannot look at this as a binary kind of thing that from one day to the other we'll start pricing with Bitcoin and using it as a unit of account. We have to understand that there is a new monetary network with its own asset that's on the rise, and it's also an investment. So I myself I'm a Bitcoiner, and I do sometimes use Bitcoin as money, but I prefer not to, because I understand that the purchasing power of my Bitcoins will increase as more people understand what I understood. So I want to spend fiat, I want to get rid of the bad money, and I want to keep the good money. And we are now at that stage. And what I expect will happen is, as soon as more people understand how big of a thing Bitcoin is and how much of a competition and how much of a pin to the bubble, to the fiat bubble it is, then we will have the true exponential growth of Bitcoin's price and usage. And that will be basically the trigger to having much more value in the Bitcoin system. That will reduce volatility, that will enable using it as a unit of account, especially in different geos, different geography. So, for example, the US will probably be the last one to price with Bitcoin, as opposed to Nigeria, where people will start pricing with Bitcoin themselves.
Pretty sure if you go back in time when gold was, quote, found and was agreed collectively that it would have been something to store value into it, it would have been way more volatile than today. In fact, I think the ETF launched, and after the ETF, I think it was 2003, 2004, if I'm not mistaken.
Mhm.
If you look at the charts, the price of gold has behaved different ever since they've got the ETF on top of it. And where do you see banks into this new economy? Like, do you see them playing a role, holding Bitcoin, lending Bitcoin, allowing you to borrow against your Bitcoin?
Yeah, so I think we are in a very interesting juncture. And it's true even if I don't talk about Bitcoin, right? In terms of geopolitics, macroeconomy, relationships between people and between governments, we are in a very unique time of history. We are also in a unique time in terms of our banking industry, our finance industry, our digital identity, our self sovereignty. I choose to start with that because in this juncture, we are going to end with either one or the other. Either we are in the most centralized system like a CBDC, or a very controlled stable coin that eventually will also come with some kind of an executive order 6102, where citizens are obliged to sell their crypto, sell their Bitcoin to the fiat money, or go to jail. So it's either we are full on technocracy mode, like Edward Griffin predicted on Creature from Jekyll Island, or we are going to go to the almost entirely different way, like 180 degrees, where you have free banking again. But this free banking, as opposed to a gold back free banking era, this time you can have a true free banking area with the transparency needed for consumers, not only to have shared custody, right? So you can share the custody with your bank, still have a counterparty to somewhat trust, but not necessarily entirely. You can create a system where regulators can actually see which account holds how many bitcoins for which client, and thereby how many bitcoins are fractionally reserved, if any. And this competition will be wide open. And essentially the barriers to start a bank, which today are here even outside of the screen, will be much lower, and you'll have an basically a new wave of community banks, regional banks, and small banks basically providing value for their own community and backing it with Bitcoin.
It looks like our entire financial system actually is built on borrowing and lending. And it looks like Bitcoin now, maybe through the fact that it's not a teenager anymore, maybe through the fact that Trump has won the election and is pushing on crypto and all this kind of stuff, we've seen a shift into the finance system, the more traditional finance system, in saying, hey, maybe we can build on this. Maybe this thing that goes up in value, it will go up forever. Do you also see or smell something changing?
Yeah, so I think there's first of all, once again, the comparison to the old system, right? So essentially, today it's going to be much more attractive to borrow against your Bitcoin because I know, and soon everybody will know that the fiat system, at least that's how it's built today, is collapsing. So you feel much more comfortable parking your value and being more conservative about how you act financially as opposed to like going crazy with fiat loans, etc. There is the important monetary aspect to understand, and this is somewhat of a Bitcoin problem, not a solution. And that is one type of like a fixed amount of currency or money. It can also be problematic because eventually, when you want to borrow, somebody else needs to loan. And if you want to basically allocate capital to what you need to have as a margin for your borrowing, like as what you park at the bank to get the additional funds from, then that money cannot be used. As opposed to, for example, today, where it can be used, it's just lent to money market funds and then it's circulating in the credit supply. So when we look at borrowing against Bitcoin and building an economy around it, we have to understand that money today is very elastic. During the day, the money supply expands substantially and all the accounting books open up, and then at the end, they close, and then they open, and then they close. It's just very elastic. It's constantly moving, and it's moving because people need money for different reasons, for different time periods, and you have to be able in a monetary system to for it to function properly, you need to enable all of that, or most of it at the very least. Now, on the one hand, you can fix it by reducing expectations for growth, by changing the way we measure economic success. How do we, for example, today it's very manipulated. GDP is probably one of the most manipulated numbers in the world. You can just print more money and then GDP goes up because it's products and services multiplied by the price. If I simplify it, obviously. So there are things that can change by the way we look at money and by the way we look at the economy and how we measure it, and by expecting slower growth and not this exponential wave that we are on from the internet to it through AI and robotics, etc. We are literally just constantly pushing, and we are able to do it because financing is very easy. There's money for everyone. Just come take it. When money will not be abundant, it will be very hard to build the next quantum computer. So you'll have to be much more vigilant on who you pick to do it and how financing will work and what will be the different milestones on the roadmap that they have to get in order to have more bitcoins to use as the capital expenditure. That basically reduces innovation, that reduces the growth of the economy, which means that it needs to come with change in perspective on how economy should work and how do we measure success in it. So Bitcoin is not perfect money, which is why also I believe fiat money will stay, especially the top currencies. Credit needs to be elastic for the supply of money to be accessible for everyone.
And I don't know if you agree with me, but I don't think Bitcoin cares in 20 years from now, 50 years from now, who has won the election. It is going to impact the price, of course, because if someone which is pro a certain technology wins the election, of course, the whole market flourishes. Whether, on the other hand, if someone won, maybe they want to suppress it or block it, we could see a temporary correction. Are you expecting the Trump effect to come in over the next, I don't know, maybe 3 to 5 years?
Yes, absolutely. It's not even signs, it's not even hints, it's not even tells. It's just everything together points to one direction and in a very strong fashion. both the adoption of stablecoins and Bitcoin as a reserve currency, and the statements coming out of essentially anyone participating in the White House decision making, from Bo Hines to Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent to Trump himself and David Sachs and Esther Pierce at the SEC, and everyone are just talking so bullishly and acting upon it as well with their own finances, I believe. And I've said it also in Israeli mainstream media press, and that received obviously lots of headlines. Bitcoin will be $1 million by 2030. I believe it will probably be sooner. And I believe that the likelihood of a godly candle, which you probably know the theory of, like this 1 week or 1 month candle of $100,000, it's coming probably sooner than what people estimate, because a lot of supply is being sucked in by the strategies of the world, right? The Bitcoin reserve currencies. And not only that, I do expect Senator Cynthia Lummis to be successful with the Bitcoin Reserve Act, which Trump supports, which means that the US will now acquire 1 million Bitcoins on 5 years, like, yeah, every year, 200,000. So not only that happens, but I've seen a recent interview by Bo Hines where he once again emphasized that Trump instructed them in the executive order that makes Bitcoin reserve. They instructed the White House Committee for Crypto to work with the Treasury Department to understand how they can buy Bitcoin regardless of the Bitcoin Reserve Act, as long as it doesn't come on taxpayer costs. I used to be a poker player. I studied a lot about body language, etc. Bo Hines talks as if the formula was already found. And it's like the statement that the Treasury has started acquiring Bitcoin, I believe, is imminent almost. In the Q3, most likely, we're already gonna hear about somewhat of an acquisition of the Treasury. I don't know if it will be a big one. Don't know if it'll be a small one, but I think it's coming before the Bitcoin Reserve Act, and then the market will start pricing the Bitcoin Reserve Act in, which is 5% of Bitcoin supply, of the circulating supply, gone for many years, and the buyer is the biggest money printer in the world.
And do you think this is going to impact the so-called Fourier cycles?
Yes, I think basically the cycles are dead. I think also that when you look at the halving cycles from a different lens and you compare it to money supply growth as opposed to the halving itself, somehow they were very correlated, but it's the money supply growth that played the most important role in Bitcoin's adoption. True, obviously, in the early days when you halve the new coins created and you reduce supply, in a very big way, after creating within almost 4 years 10 million bitcoins, moving on to creating just 5 million bitcoins, moving on to create just 2.5 million. Now the halving is become much less significant, and it's only the supply side. In the supply side, you have more than 85% of Bitcoin long-term holders not selling their Bitcoins, not moving them from their wallets. You have just a bit over 2 million Bitcoins in exchanges, not including over-the-counter desks. You have an estimate of 2 to 4 million Bitcoins that are lost forever. Basically, the supply side is getting a huge crunch. The liquidity is even more crunched, and the demand, especially with adopting stablecoins as a strategy, is his number go up insanely. So I think that to continue talking about cycles is probably wrong. I think that we are in the beginning of a new cycle that is going to be modeled differently, most likely, as in a few years of huge money printing, because we are at war and it looks like war is going to expand and we already see the latest NATO assembly where they decided to increase all of the NATO members just on security to 5% of GDP. That's hundreds of billions of dollars that are going to come into the economy, and they're going to do it fast because it's coming imminently to Europe too.
Talk about an analogy perhaps that maybe resonates with you and your experience in poker playing. Like if I invite you to my home to play poker and there is you, me, and a bunch of friends, We are relaxed, we don't care, we just play, of course, professionally, passionately, but, in a different way, as opposed to if you go to a tournament, right? I like to say that Bitcoin is a network and you participate however you like. You can be a trader, you can be a long holder, you can be someone who buys, sells tomorrow. It's up to you. But now we've seen a bunch of people or companies or businesses or nations wanting to play the poker game, right, on the table. And I don't think they're going to go in and buy and sell when this thing doubles, right? Like El Salvador, for example, Bukele is not going to sell when Bitcoin goes to 200,000. Michael Saylor is not buying because strategy wants to double their money. So I agree with you. I also feel like the cycles have to be somewhat impacted. You mentioned stablecoin a couple of times. And if you think about whenever banks are going to bend the knee to the blockchain technology in general, and I think they are already, they're experimenting, they're testing, they're doing some stuff. This is going to onboard millions of people into the so-called blockchain, right? And then once you have stable coins on your bank account, well, it's just a click away to buy Bitcoin.
You won't even need your bank. That's the most beautiful thing, especially when you look at the 2 billion people unbanked and the other 2 billion that are living under a collapsing fiat currency system, where for them to now have a self custody dollar in their own wallet without relying on counterparty, that's very, very good for them. That's even if the dollar is also a failing currency, it's if you heard of Brent Johnson's milkshake theory, it's still the cleanest shirt in the laundry bag, right? They prefer to hold the dollar, and now they can do it in their pockets with the Fed being their direct liability as opposed to the central bank of Turkey, and that basically allows the US money printer to start working directly to them. It will be less, and when it will be less, they will start moving to Bitcoin, and they will be able to do it with peer-to-peer markets and with decentralized exchanges, even if it means that they have to jump from USDT to WBTC and then from WBTC to BTC. It will still be worth their while, and they'll still be able to do it from within their wallets, and they'll also be born into it. So for them, most of them at least, financial services, loans, borrowing, trading, most of it is not available for them, especially not at scale. So now they'll be able to do all of it from their wallet, and all they need is the internet.
Hence why, the Trump family has launched the USD1, which is a stable coin, is on Tether. Of course, they have, less than 100 employees and they make billions of dollars a year. Not mentioned, like you said so well, the option to extend the dominance through places where no bank is necessary. Just download an app. I can send you stable coins. They're also easier to control because, stable coins are smart money, as you can call them if you wish. Easy to be frozen, easy to be confiscated. You can go down to certain paths, and that's definitely something that it could very much indeed happen. And you mentioned $1 million in 2030. So do you see us going strong and steady, or do you expect those God candles
I
moment
believe
coming
there
in?
will be corrections. Corrections have to happen, and I don't know which company it will be among the Bitcoin reserve companies that will fail and will create some kind of chaos. We will definitely have some kind of a psychological cycle that needs to wash out the weak hands. So you have the diamond hands, the long-term holders, the one that understand. You have the riders that come with their weekends, think that they're going to be rich within a week, and they just buy without knowing what they hold. That's going to stay with us. And whether the correction will be from 200 to 150, from 350 to 200, from 700 to 500, I have no idea. There will be corrections along the path, but I think we're playing a different game. And Saylor said it as well, Michael Saylor, that eventually the light bulb is gonna really open up for people, for decision makers, and they are going to understand that the strategy of basically shorting your own currency or a different currency in order to buy Bitcoin is a winning strategy. And when that happens, it accelerates the Bitcoin adoption, and it also accelerates the decline of their own currency. And I think that we are gonna experience that game in the coming 5 years because of the war, because of the trustless state that we are in. And it's not just between foes, right? It's not BRICS against the US, it's also the US against City of London and the EU. Like you, so you have inner problems too, which means that the UK is what who was it? The Italy finance minister said we need to be scared of stablecoins. We need to, for example, adopt the Euro CBDC fast so that we can block stablecoins from our economy, because they, or at least some of them, understand that it's a Trojan horse that's going to take away their ability to control their own currency.
I don't know if you agree with me, but it feels like all these kind of propaganda versus the stable coins or CBDCs is just advertisement for Bitcoin, right? At the end of the day, they are just making it easier for people to understand why they should own some Bitcoin.
Yeah, I see it as US dollar stable coins being a Trojan horse for the world, Bitcoin being a Trojan horse for stable coins, and therefore it is the winner. But there is this star that we need to address, which is what I mentioned before. We are not just fighting for the future of money, we are fighting for the future of freedom and technocracy. And we are fighting against very, very strong powers that keep on pushing very hard to create digital money connected to digital identity, connected to digital programmed laws that essentially puts us all in a digital cage and replaceable or deletable, if that's even a word, within a keystroke. And I think eventually the battle for on the money front is a battle for the future of freedom. That's why I chose to do what I do. That's why yesterday, when I spoke at the parliament in the first ever Israeli parliament crypto conference, I specifically mentioned that we need to cancel the Israeli central bank digital shekel project, so that we need to fight the central bank digital currency here in Israel. And I actually wrote a 30 like a 10,000 word paper against the Israeli shekel and explaining why it needs to be canceled and why it's not only not beneficial, but it's a tool for technocracy, for the ultimate one. I hope that my lobbying efforts and my influence and other people's around the world as well, like Efrat Fenixon, my very close friend, who's also very vocal about central bank digital currencies and their ability to control us. I hope that will work, because I believe that the battle for freedom, for maintaining freedom, or at least somewhat of freedom abilities, starts with money. We need to understand money, we need to fight for free money, and then the rest of it, when they don't have the trees anymore planted just in their own garden, they cannot buy the politicians the same way, they cannot fix the wars the same ways, they cannot play with us the way they do today.
Thank you so much for your contribution. By the way, I've met Efrat in Amsterdam last year. She also has been on my show. As always, guys, of course, you will find Ben links in the description down below, so make sure to give him a follow.
Thank you. Thank you. You too.
And guys, thank you so much for watching. We'll see you on the next one.